Okay, so we're live. Okay, so this is my 5-minute lightning talk on if you like it, then you should put a thing on it. So uh, just quick, my name's Nick Shu, awesome1989 on Twitter, and I'm a dev sysadmin. That's enough about me. So the key points of this lightning talk I'm going to cover is the Phing build file, a bit of a basic sharing pattern, so you can share around these build files between projects, and also the ability to, if you don't like what's being shared, you can sort of override it and change it a little bit, which is sort of a pretty common approach that we have at Previous Next as well. So first, why choose Phing? Well, it provides a lot of really cool structure to your project. If you have a large project, you want your steps to be reproducible, and you also want that documented. So whether that's like, how do we test the application? Well, we do this, 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 and this. That's all documented in your build.xml file. And it also forms a great base for continuous integration. So what I run locally, I can also run on my test environments. So jumping into it, so the Phing build file, the build.xml file that goes into your project, this is a little basic sample of Hello World. So you'll notice that I named the project Hello World Example. The default target that it's going to fire is called build. It's aware of what directory it's in, and I also just added a little description for the project, but that could be like my Previous Next project or something along those lines. We declare some properties, so they're kind of like variables basically, and in this case it's just hello world, and then we've declared our target of build, which if you're familiar with the command line, you can say echo, so it'll print it to the screen. Cool. So next you have a property file. In Phing, by default, the build.properties file will be loaded. This is your opportunity for like a last-minute property change. So if you have a snowflake environment, you can change those things here. You have an opportunity for a last-minute switch of the properties. So in this case, I really like exclamation marks, so I decided to have 3 on the end of my hello world. Cool. So now a Drupal example. So how would I do this in Drupal? Well, in this case, as you can see, I've named my project standard, which I'll come back to that very shortly. But that could be anything from, like, in the case of the Previous Next portfolio site, it could be just Previous Next. We've got that same default build, but that could be anything else, and just updated the description. Now, the things that have changed to take mention of is the properties. So we're declaring where our Drupal application is. It's taking the project base directory, which is that base dir item that we declared above. So that'll actually translate to, on your local, it'll translate the entire path. So for me, it's like /users Nick Shu projects pnx blah blah, and we've also got the docker root here. We like to put our Drupal applications into app, so that's nice, but other projects don't. Some people like docker root and some people like other bits and pieces, so we've declared those as overridable here. And as you can see, we're just doing a basic build, so if I were to pull the project down, I could run Phing and it would run this build task, or I could run Phing build and it'll do the same thing. But it'll revert all the features as per that first exec, and then it'll clear the cache. And as I mentioned before, some people don't place their Drupal application under the app directory, such as Acquia projects. They like to have the application under docker root. So, I mean, in this case, this is just an example of how you could override that locally, and I'll show you how you could override that sort of globally on a project, but this is just an example of how you could override that. Okay, so now you've been bootstrapped into Phing. Here's a little basic sharing pattern that I like to use. So as you saw before, we had a project called standard, and in this case, I've created like that build XML, and I've put it somewhere called standard.xml. So that could be in, I strongly recommend that that goes into a repository, and you're either checking it out with Composer or a Git submodule, but just so then you can have a conversation around that standard build profile. Because what this is going to do is it's going to bootstrap like sort of a beginner workflow on your project, right? So as you can see here, I've started a new project. I've just called it Drupal. My default task is build, and then I've imported that standard.xml file from before. And that's just wherever it is checked out in version control. And I've also set it to optional equals true. Otherwise, for the first time you run it and that file doesn't exist, it's going to fail. And what this will do is pull in all those targets. So in this case, just the build. But you could have things from PHP-CS to Behat to all kinds of little crazy tasks that you want to distribute out across projects. And here's an example of how you would override one of these targets locally, right? So the use case for this is just say I imported the standard build like the standard approach, and I don't really like it, you know, like as you can see here, I want to do an update DB before I do a features revert and a cache clear. Well, you have the opportunity to just copy and paste that chunk into there and then do whatever you want with it. So, and that will override the build task. But you know, that's a bit messy, right? Like I've copied and pasted that whole chunk, and what if someone committed something to a standard.xml that's really cool, and I wanted my project, and you know, like I would have to watch that and copy and paste a new chunk. It's not very scalable, I guess you could say. But in this case, as you can see here, I've done a Phing call instead. So I've overridden the build target. I've said I want to do my update DB, but then I also want to call the parent build Phing target. So then that way, if any updates happen in the build target upstream, we'll still get those going. So you know, if upstream wanted to do 2 cache clears for some crazy reason at the very end, you would get that. So cool. So yeah, I'm also going to talk about this at Drupal, well, hopefully going to talk about this at Drupal South Melbourne. I've put in a session, so please comment on it. I plan to take the talk that step further, so I guess a bigger Phing bootstrap, but also talking about how you can extend it with custom targets. I also want to show some examples of some really cool extendable build files or projects. And also, sort of to top it off, a pretty cool pattern that uses like a Symphony console app with Phing wrapped around it. So then you can start to import these little chunks of functionality into your project as required. Cool. So that's me. Any questions? Nope, no questions. Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Done. Sounded okay?
Yeah, sounded good. It
And
says
not,
delay though.
oh, damn. Stop